I can't really drive anymore, or I can't work. I can never be gainfully employed, and I can't have kids or get married anymore due to my Huntington's disease.
Huntington's disease. It's a degenerative neurological disorder that approximately 30,000 Americans currently suffer from. Meghan Sullivan was diagnosed with it when she was only 19 years old.
I had a boyfriend at the time. I came home from my day on the mountains. I decided to buy myself some lemonade, spilled the whole entire pitcher on the floor. And I told my mom in the kitchen, I said, "Mom, I think I have HD. She said, "Honey, it's okay. I know you do too."
Originally, HD was recognized by jerky involuntary movements called chorea, the Greek word for dance. Dr. Samuel Frank specializes in movement disorders, particularly HD.
Huntington's disease is a brain disorder, and it's a progressive problem that gets worse over time. And because it affects the brain, it can affect your movements, and so people have extra involuntary movements.
Characteristic symptoms of HD include involuntary movement, cognitive impairment, mood disorders, and behavioral changes. HD is caused by an abnormal trinucleotide repeat in the Huntington gene.
The Huntington gene codes for a protein called Huntingtin, and we know that it's necessary because when you take it out of mice, for example, they can't survive. So it's a necessary protein and gene for development, but when you have too many copies of it, it causes problems.
Huntington's disease is dominantly transferred, so children with a parent who's an HD carrier have a 50% chance of inheriting the disease. Meghan acquired it from her father, John, a former police chief. John Sullivan died in September 2008 after a 20-year battle with HD.
She looked just like her dad did at the beginning of his onset with HD. Of course, I hoped that neither of my daughter would get HD, but if they had to get it, I was figuring they would be in their 30s or 40s, not 19.
American physician George Huntington first recognized HD in 1872, but it wasn't until the last 20 years that any real progress was made in diagnosing the disease. Gina DeLucia's ex-husband, Patrick Drosis, had HD.
My ex-husband's mother died of Huntington's disease. Her diagnosis was very delayed because when her mother got diagnosed, they thought that she was an alcoholic.
It wasn't until the early 1990s that Patrick was diagnosed.
The day after my second son was born, we found out that he had HD.
It was a revelation that came too late to prevent passing the disease on. At only 10 years of age, Gina's first son, Patrick Anthony, was diagnosed with HD.
I think in the back of my head, I always thought that that was a possibility. I remember sitting there at the doctor's office as she's telling me the results, crying, and I'm like sitting there consoling her like, it's okay, it's not anything I haven't thought of before.
The age of onset varies greatly, from only 2 years old to as old as 80. Both Patrick Anthony and Meghan got juvenile onset HD. Survival from onset to death ranges from 10 to 30 years. On March 2, 2008, Patrick Anthony Drosis succumbed to HD. He was 15 years old.
He loved his family, he loved just being alive, and he never took one day for granted and lived it all to the fullest of that he could. Never gave up, not one day.
Dr. Richard Myers has worked in HD research since the start of his career in 1975. He was part of the team that located and cloned the Huntington gene in 1993.
But if you do something like you clone the gene and you create a test for something like Huntington's disease, you have a little responsibility to try to make sure it's used appropriately.
Aside from research, Dr. Myers tests people for HD. While 30,000 Americans suffer from HD, 200,000 more possibly carry the disorder. Yet only a small percentage take advantage of predictive testing.
Is that there's no treatment. And so if you don't have a treatment for a disease, then what are you accomplishing by performing that test?
If a child does not inherit the gene, they will not develop the disease, and they cannot pass on HD to subsequent generations. Patrick Anthony's younger brother, Jonathan Adams, says he wants to be tested for this very reason.
Because I want to make sure I don't have it and my kids can't get it.
Likewise, Cheryl Sullivan's older daughter, Caitlin, went through a gamut of testing before deciding to start a family.
I'm really proud of Caitlin and John for the courage and the determination they had to ensure that their child did not have the HD gene. And now we know that Tegan has broken the chain of HD in our family.
The combination of emotional, cognitive, and motor symptoms in HD means a high level of care is needed, both from family and professional caregivers. The HD Society of America estimates the annual national cost of HD to be around $2.5 billion. Following her diagnosis, Meghan moved home so her mom, a nurse, could take care of her. At the same point, her father had been living for years in the HD wing of Tewksbury State Hospital. Currently, treatments can only slow the onset of HD and target individual symptoms. In 2008, tetrabenazine was the first drug approved by the Food and Drug Administration to treat chorea. Treatments for slowing the progression of HD include large doses of creatine, a supplement taken by athletes. Research continues testing various substances, both in humans and mice.
Good candidates, then, that we try to bring through the process of trying them in people, and they're in varying stages of development. So a lot of very interesting and potentially exciting things that can be used for people in Huntington's disease.
To me, it's very exciting to see that there are tens of compounds, not one or two compounds, that are in development and are in clinical trials at this point. But there are dopamine stabilizing agents, there are agents that work in histamine. So there's lots of different drugs that are in development.
She's one of only about 3,500.
In spite of the huge steps made in HD research and treatment over the last 20 years, there is still no cure, and Meghan's time is ticking away.
When Meghan was first diagnosed in March of 2007, the neurologist said, make the next 2 or 3 years be all about Meghan, because she said by the time she turns 30, if she's even still here, that she would definitely be in a nursing facility.
At first I was very angry for about 6 months at my mom, especially angry at my family. And at first I was really angry, but then eventually I started to be more accepting and less depressed.
For BUTV, I'm Kayla Ayers.